There are plenty of stereotypes about different groups of people and their driving, from Asians being bad drivers to BMW owners not knowing what a turn signal is. But one stereotype stands above all, that women are worse drivers than men. And while there is evidence to support this, it's not quite that simple. In fact, as a little headline stat for you, in 2020, 72% of all motor vehicle crash deaths were men, with 30% of those resulting from excessive speed. Women, on the other hand, accounted for the remaining 28% of vehicle crash deaths, with only 20% of those resulting from excessive speed. So who's actually the worst driver? Because looking at those stats, I should just give my keys to my mom and have her drive me around everywhere. The answer comes after taking a good look at all the statistics and pondering the natural and behavioral differences between men and women. Hello people of the internet, I'm Nico, someone who is yet to know what it's like to be cancelled, and today I'm diving in the deep end of data to find out once and for all, are men actually the better drivers? Let's start off where every driver starts off, with the driving tests. Now, finding data pertaining to the US turned out surprisingly hard, but I found ample evidence proving that women are better with driving tests in other countries. Actually, that's not quite right. According to the UK Department for Transport, women are better with the theory test, with a roughly 6% difference in passing rate between men and women, and the same can be seen in this study in Sweden, where women outperform men by 6% to 9%. Thereby proving that women are better at remembering things than men. So ladies, please stop getting mad at us for forgetting again, we just can't help it. Plea aside, women are better in theory, but in practice the stats flip. The difference is slightly smaller with a 4.3% difference, but it suggests that men are better at dealing with the stresses of being tested in the real world. And here's a graph to see the difference over the years. Both follow basically the same trends, but you can see that men are always a few percent above. A likely player in this difference between male and female learning drivers is the self-confidence level in the respective drivers. According to the study published to the National Library of Medicine, male drivers had far more self-confidence in the actual driving portion of the test, which actually plays into some alarming crash statistics that I'll get to later. By contrast, female drivers had a lower self-confidence rating by half a point, which likely plays into the general more cautious and therefore safer driving style. Now, speaking of those crash statistics, what is so alarming about them? Well, the fact that men appear to be far worse drivers, and I mean far worse. The simple facts are these: men crash more often than women, men are involved in over twice as many fatal car crashes as women, men are involved in more injury-only car crashes and property damage car crashes, and it's been that way since 1975. Take a look at these graphs here. For the past 45 years, men have been involved in 2 to 4 times as many fatal car crashes. The number is coming down thankfully, but even today, men are dominating the stats. For injury and property damage crashes, the difference isn't quite as drastic, but men still have the highest numbers from 1988 through 2020. So the question you may be asking now is, why do men crash so much more when the stereotype is that women are worse drivers? Well, I can't give a definitive answer just yet, but I can say that more men involved in fatal crashes had a blood alcohol content level above the legal limit, and more men drive without a seatbelt. Not exactly looking good for guys right now. More fatal accidents as a result of drinking too much and not wearing a seatbelt, but ladies, you also have some issues to work out. Parking is one of them. Both in my own experience as well as some studies, men park more quickly and more accurately, but that isn't the biggest issue. The biggest issue, and ladies, I'm sorry to call you out on this, is that you use your cell phones while driving way too much, and noticeably more than guys do. Women drive while on a call more and actively use their phones while driving more than guys do, and in the times that men use their phones, more of us use a headset so that we can keep both hands on the wheel. Now, guys aren't perfect, we also use our phones while driving too much, but we don't text or call Becky to talk about how Tyler failed to notice the different brand of makeup you use today. This though will be a point I use to show some general differences between men and women, and ultimately why you could still argue that men are better drivers. Not safer drivers, but better drivers. And if you've already made up your mind on who you think is the better driver, then comment below why you think they are. Now, generally speaking, men are more interested in things than women are, and women are more interested in people and having connections with those people. Now, there are certainly exceptions to this, but as a kind of general rule of thumb, it is definitely true. Now, potentially this would also explain why women use their phone more while driving, though this could also be put down to their ability to multitask. It's easy to see this difference in interest with career choices, for example, with fields like nursing being dominated by women while engineering is mostly comprised of men. This is not a bad thing, and there are certainly more factors involved than gender. It just goes to show that generally women are more interested in people than men are. So with that in mind, men are to some extent more interested in cars, and by extension will be more interested in driving. And usually the more interested someone is in something, the more likely they are to improve on those skills than those less interested. But because of men's increased levels of self-confidence and this seeking of improving our own driving skills, we are more likely to speed or engage in other risky driving behaviors, which then leads to more crashes. In line with the speeding, men tend to be more aggressive drivers, honking the horn 3 times more quickly than women if someone fails to pull away at a green light, usually because it's Becky reading that message about how Tyler didn't notice any difference in makeup. Part of the aggression, though, can be explained through the increased levels of testosterone, which have been found to correlate with increased risk-taking, sensation-seeking, and various aggressive behaviors. One thing about aggressive driving, not that I've done this necessarily, but you very quickly learn spatial awareness, the physical boundaries of your car, the limit of the tires, and generally the limits of the car itself. So with aggressive driving, you become more comfortable with the extremes, which is ultimately what teaches you to become a more skilled driver. And since guys tend to take that risk of driving aggressively, they then learn to become better skilled drivers. Unfortunately, this combo of aggressive driving and learning how to place your car on the road can then lead to increased self-confidence, which would then help explain why men dominate the crash statistics. So who is the better driver? Well, I guess that depends on what you consider to be a good driver. I think a good driver is based on their skill set, not necessarily that they drive more cautiously. And in the case for men, you can argue that while aggressive driving isn't safe, there are instances where aggressive acceleration or steering inputs are needed. Also, increased phone usage is certainly not a good look if you want to argue that women are better drivers, but then again, statistically, women are the safer drivers since they're involved in less crashes across the board. In my own experience, I would say that guys are better drivers. I've seen some interesting character changes made to cars in the form of dents and scrapes, and usually they were on the cars of women that I know. Certainly after witnessing a friend driving over the ramps I set up in order to do an oil change did I think, yeah, I'd better take care of this myself. Now, that's not to say I haven't met guys that are bad drivers, but generally speaking, despite the alarming crash statistics, I would say that guys are better drivers. Not safer drivers necessarily, but better. At the end of the day, it's hard to say if men or women are better drivers because it depends on many factors other than gender, like experience behind the wheel or even eyesight. But based on my own experience and the fact that more men are interested in things such as cars, I would say that men are usually the better drivers. It's certainly debatable, and if you disagree with anything I've said, then fire away in the comments below, but that's what I think. If you want to know whether or not gas-powered cars are better than electric cars, then watch my video, The Best and Worst of Electric Cars. If you enjoyed this video, then consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Until next time, people of the internet, peace out.